Today we're looking at Deuteronomy chapter 1 verse 3, and we've got a little bit longer verse today and some unique constructions here that we'll take a look at. So let's just read through the verse, and actually before we read through the verse, let's take a look at the vocabulary for this verse. I've pulled here, this is all the vocabulary that comes from Deuteronomy 1 verse 3, and a lot of this you'll be familiar with, so the bait preposition, Chodesh, this is the word for month, or it can just mean a new thing, particularly a new moon. That's why it's associated with month. El preposition, Vav conjunction, Haya, to be, or he was, or it was. Arba, we'll get into numbers in the second semester of elementary Hebrew, but Arba means four. And the way that the numbers work, when you put a number in the plural form, so if it's masculine, it would be arabim. You would put the hirik yod mem on the end. That's like adding like a 10x to it. So arba, when you make it arbim, it goes from 4 to 40. Okay, you're not going to use the plural form of four. We don't say there were fours books on the shelf. We say there were 4 books on the shelf. 4 itself is plural. But when we add that plural suffix hirik yod mem, that's going to indicate that we're multiplying the number by 10. So arba, when you add that plural suffix, becomes 40. We've also got shana. This is the word for year. Here we've got aste, which usually means 11 or 11th. But we're going to see here that it's in construct with asar. So we've got ashte asar, and that together is going to refer to 11. So it's a little unusual. Echad, this is the word for one. So we've got a lot of numbers in this verse. That has to do with the fact that we're kind of setting a time for when this is taking place. We've got our lamed preposition, which we're used to, definite article. The verb davar, we saw this before in verse 1. Davar means he spoke. Moshe, again, we've seen Moses' name. Bain, we know his son. Yisrael, Israel. The kaf preposition. Then we have kol for all, each, every, the whole. Asher, Asher is our relative pronoun. Tzava, this is a verb that means to command or to order. And then we've got the divine name, Yahweh or Adonai, and our definite direct object marker. So having gone through the vocabulary here, let's go over to the verse, and we'll just read through it here. So we have Vayhi be'arba'im shana be'aste asar chodesh be'echad lachodesh diber Moshe el bnei Yisrael kekol esher tziva Adonai oto aleichem. So coming back to the beginning here, we see that the verse starts with this form, Vayehi, and after second semester, you will come to recognize this is a very common way to begin not just a narrative, but often a verse within a narrative. This is a very common formula in historical narrative literature. This is basically the verb haya, which means it happened, or it became, or it came to be. And we've got a particular form on haya that tells us that this is what we call there's a lot of different names for this construction. Usually we refer to it as a vayiktol. That's sort of the Hebrew way of explaining what this is without a lot of the trappings of English terminology. It doesn't really communicate a lot of meaning, and that's fine because the phenomenon of what's going on here is a little confusing and disputed. But basically, when you see the verb haya in what is the jussive form, again, jussive is something we'll learn about next semester, with this particular use of the vav conjunction, this is setting a scene in the past. And we might translate this literally as, and it happened, bait preposition, on 40, except here we've got on 40 year. So here the word for 40, this is being used as an ordinal number, designating order, rather than a cardinal number. So instead of on 40 year, it would be on 40th year. You might expect there to be a definite article here, but oftentimes when you have a number like this, modifying an ordinal, modifying a noun, oftentimes the article, Hebrew just doesn't use it. So we are free to translate this literally as, and it happened in the 40th year, and then we've got bait again, be'aste asar. This whole phrase is just going to be translated as on the 11th Chodesh. Chodesh here is the word for month. And it happened in the 40th year. 40th year from what? Well, we'll have to think about that a little bit. But you can imagine the 40th year in this context. On the 11th, or in the 11th month. And then we've got another bait. Be'echad lachodesh. So in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the one for the month. This is a little idiomatic, but this is a Hebrew way of saying on the first day of the month. On one for the month, on the first day for the month. So on the first of the month. What happened on the first of the month? Diber Moshe. So here again, this normal word order is for you to have your verb and then your subject. So Diber Moshe, Moses spoke. To whom did Moses speak? El, to, he spoke to, B'nai Yisrael. B'nai, this is the word for son, Bain. This is in the masculine plural construct form. The Sarah Yod indicates the masculine plural construct. Spoke to, and again, the definiteness of our construct noun is determined by the definiteness of its absolute noun. We don't see an article ever on the construct. So how do we determine whether or not we should say spoke to sons of Israel or spoke to the sons of Israel? Well, context makes the very appropriate, but we can confirm that when we look at the definiteness of the absolute. Now you might say, well, there's no definite article on here. Remember, there are three ways that a noun can be definite in Hebrew. One is for it to have the definite article. That obviously marks it as definite. But a noun is also definite if it has a possessive suffix. If you are referring to someone's specific's house, or his horse, my horse, something like that, well, then you're referring to a specific instance of a horse, not a general one, and that by definition is definite. So we don't have the article, we don't have any possessive suffixes. The third way a noun can be definite in Hebrew is if it is a proper noun. A proper noun, which is basically a personal name or a location name, basically anything that you would any noun that you would capitalize in English, even if it's not at the beginning of a sentence. Those are, again, by definition, they are referring to specific places. Those are also definite. So here, Yisrael, this is the word Israel. Israel is a proper noun. And so it is definite. To the sons of Israel. Now in English, we don't add the to proper nouns, just like Hebrew doesn't do that. If you've had Greek before, you'll know that personal names often do have the article on them. But English and Hebrew don't do that. So, it happened in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first for the month, the first day of the month, Moses spoke. Now this is a particular form of this verb. So far in first semester, we have learned the Cal perfect form. I can't remember if we got into the Cal imperfect form yet. But the Cal form, this is basically for Cal perfect, we would expect root letter 1, kametz, root letter 2, patach, and then root letter 3. But here we see a hierik in R1 and a segel in R2. This shows us that we're not in the cal stem anymore, we're in the PL stem. And so the PL stem gets used a little bit differently. We'll learn more about that in second semester. But here we have Moses spoke to the sons of Israel, Kikol. Right? So Kikol, remember that our kaf preposition here can have a few different meanings. It can mean as or like, or it can mean according to, maybe even in conformity with. So this, again, this kaf preposition, this is going back to diber. This is how Moses spoke. This is in what respect Moses spoke. Moses spoke according to kol, all that, or all which. Tziva, this is another PL, and one of the signs of the PL here is going to be the P-E-E-E, the hierik in R1, and a dagesh in R2. So again, this vav here, this is a consonantal vav. This is not a shurik. How do you know when a vav plus a dagesh is consonantal with a dagesh, and how do you know when this form is a shurik? Well, again, remember, anytime you have a vowel, it can't have its own vowel. So a vowel cannot have its own vowel. If this were a shurik, the shurik would have a kametz. You can't have that happen. All right. Plus, if it were a shurik, tzade already has a hierik. So which consonant would be taking the shurik? It doesn't work. This has to be a consonantal vav with a dagesh in it. And the first of the two dageshim is closing the first syllable, tziv, and the second of the two dageshim, or sorry, not two dageshim, vavs, vavim, whatever. The second of the two vavs is opening the final syllable, va. So we get tziv, va. Tziva, or tsava, if you were looking at a lexical form, means he commanded or he ordered. And so we get our verb and then our subject. Who ordered? According to all that Yahweh, Adonai, the Lord, ordered or commanded. Oto. I know it doesn't look like it here, but this is actually our definite direct object marker. This is that what we usually see as et or eight, and it's marking the direct object, but we've added sort of a, we'll call it a pronoun suffix or a pronominal suffix here. This holam vav represents a pronoun, and it represents the third masculine singular pronoun, which as an object would be him. Might be it, but we're pretty sure we're referring back to who did Yahweh command? Commanded him, Moses. So Moses spoke to the sons of Israel according to all that Yahweh commanded him to them. We would probably add a parenthetical, like in English, we would probably add something like to say to them, commanded him to tell to them, or something like that. We'd probably add a verb of speech to make this a little more clear in English. So let's polish this translation up a little bit. We'll go phrase by phrase. We'll come through here and we'll stop at the Atnach, and then we'll do the second half. So we started off with, it happened in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first day of the month. We can leave this Vayehi translated, it happened, but we don't really need it in English. This is a convention in Hebrew that doesn't so much add meaning, semantic value to the verse, as it adds discursive or structural value to the verse in Hebrew. This word here, its primary purpose is to indicate that we are now beginning a narrative. And you can see, you might think, well, didn't we begin the narrative up here in Deuteronomy 1:1? This is more of a heading, you know. These are the words which Moses spoke to all Israel in the land opposite the Jordan, in the wilderness, in the desert, in front of Suf, between Paran and Tophel, and Laban and Hazeroth and Di-Hazav. So this is sort of setting up background context. This is almost parenthetical, sort of like, by the way, it is 11 days from Horeb, or there are 11 days from Horeb by way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. Then we start in with our narrative, and that's what the Vayehi signals here. So you're welcome to leave it in. It happened in the 40th year, but it comes off a little awkward in English. We don't usually start a sentence that way. So you might just translate this as, in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first of the month, Moses spoke to the children of Israel. You can say the sons of Israel, but this is obviously referring to more than just male children. You could even say the people of Israel, because this is referring, you might want to keep children just to kind of bring out that lineage aspect. These are all descended. And of course, that's not exactly right, because you'll remember that there were some who came with Israel as they left Egypt. But for the most part, the reason to keep children here is to reflect the lineal connection to Israel. And this being Israel as far as Jacob goes, the sons of Jacob, rather than necessarily the sons of a nation. All right, so he spoke to the children of Israel, the sons of Israel. How did he speak? He spoke according to all that Yahweh commanded him to say to them. All right, so that's verse 3. We'll look at verse 4 next time. Hopefully that's helpful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know.